What they did with the anti-Muslim scare since 9/11 is what they're doing with transgender folks, specifically LGBTQ.
From Interfaith Alliance, this is The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush in New York City.
It is literally, Paul, the same story. They've just rebooted the villain. I connected the dots. I said they're going to prey on us. Don't allow them to do a divide and conquer.
This week on The State of Belief, writer and commentator Wajahat Ali. Waj is the author of Go Back to Where You Came From and other helpful recommendations on becoming American. Please make sure you subscribe, share, and rate The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. Our library of past conversations includes well over 100 hopeful, empowering, inspiring interviews with guests like Congressman Eric Swalwell, Maggie Siddiqui, the writer Jeff Charlotte, Bishop Marion Buddy, and many, many others. You can help grow The State of Belief with a financial contribution right now. Find out more at stateofbelief.com, and you can support and join the work of Interfaith Alliance at interfaithalliance.org. So, before we get to our conversation with Wajahat Ali, I just want to say a few words about something that happened at the Southern Baptist Convention gathering a week ago. And that is that they passed a resolution that was going to focus the incredible power that the Southern Baptist Convention has, both spiritually and organizationally and, with all of their membership. They're going to focus as a important effort to overturn the ruling of the Supreme Court in support of same-sex marriage. So you have, I think still the largest Protestant religious organization, millions of members, who are going to spend their efforts attacking the rights of millions of other Americans and stripping away rights. And, this is personal for me. I mean, what would it mean for me to have my marriage annulled because a group of Christians decided that was what they wanted to do? And this is, it's so dangerous and it's so sad. I'll say it's even pathetic, because here we are in, so much pain and trauma as a country, so many people suffering, so many people hurting, and people being disappeared by ICE, people suffering from hunger, homelessness, spiritual crisis. There's just no end to how many ways a deeply spiritual community could show up in America right now. Instead, they're focusing their energy on stripping rights away from fellow Americans. And so I'm just, I'm calling what it is. It's an attack on my family. It's an attack on my tradition, my religious tradition, which supports gay marriage. And I would say it's a broadside. You're going to be hearing from me about it. But I couldn't believe they were doing it. And already there are 10 states that have introduced measures to overturn same-sex marriage in their state. And so this is, they're not just saying as a principle we oppose same-sex marriage. They're not saying in our churches we will not perform same-sex marriage, which is their right, that is religious freedom. They're not saying we encourage our membership to not be involved in same-sex marriage, which is their right. They could say that. What they're saying is no Americans should be able to have this fundamental right. No one. And so, that's where they're attacking the idea of religious diversity. They're attacking the idea of diversity in general. That there are different kinds of Americans who want to live their life. My ability to love as I choose. My ability to live as I choose. So I just want to. I'm condemning it. And I think it's a very sad indictment of the smallness of the Southern Baptist Convention and where they've gone as a fundamentalist institution that is uninterested in the true mandates of loving your neighbor. And so that's all I'm going to say about that for right now. And let's go to the conversation with Wajahat Ali. Wajahat Ali is a Daily Beast columnist, a writer, commentator, and keen observer of what this country seems to be doing to itself. His powerful book is titled Go Back to Where You Came From and Other Helpful Recommendations on How to Become an American. Waj has a must-read Substack titled The Left Hook, and he also co-hosts the Democracy-ish podcast. Let me just say, those are well-named outlets for you. Perfect. The child of immigrants, he's an invaluable contributor to the conversation around patriotism, diversity, and democracy, and I am very happy to have him back on The State of Belief. Wash, thank you so much for joining me.
That was an amazing introduction. You made me sound much more cool than I am. And if I wasn't married, I could have gone about 2 dates off it. So thank you.
You are very, I would not say you're cool, but you are amazing. And you're one of my favorite people to listen to. You're one of my favorite people out there. I'm so grateful to you. And I'm also aware that because you actually have thoughts and opinions, and you share them, this might be a really intense time for you, as it is for all of us. So I just want to start by saying, how's your spiritual, mental, physical health? How are you doing?
First, I'm offended that you don't think I'm cool, and I'm assuming that's because you're looking at me right now where I'm sitting in front of Lego sets and books. So it's okay. The evidence before you probably will make you conclude that I'm not cool. Even though I'm not cool and hip, nonetheless, I have 3 young kids who like me, and that kind of goes a long way to center me in this time of rising fascism. And I think we should name it, right? This is in my opinion, a fascist regime. And if people want me to explain why I use those words, I gladly will. I think the evidence is there. As we're recording this, there's assaults on universities, on undocumented people, on people legally here, on students, on the press. We're welcoming South African white refugees based upon the lie of a white supremacist lie and conspiracy that is spouted by Nazis about the white genocide, as we are trying to remove, not we, but the Trump administration is trying to remove the temporary protected status of Cubans and Venezuelans and El Salvadorans, and, keeping Afghans from coming here, the same Afghans who helped U.S. soldiers fight the Taliban. And we're seeing, lies and deception, and the world's worst people fail up, openly accepting bribes, whether it's luxury jets from Qatar or, pay for play access. You buy my meme coin and I'll pardon your dad and I'll pardon your son. Literally, that's what's happening. So it's a combination of fascism and an oligarchy, and you're seeing, the world's worst people allegedly thrive as the world's, marginalized are struggling, Paul, just to get, Medicaid and Social Security and health care and vaccines. And the people who will suffer, as you know, are the poor, moms, children, and our elders. So when you look at all of it happening in real time in your lifetime, first and foremost, I kind of feel like the world's worst Cassandra, like the brown Cassandra. It's like the world's worst I told you so. And it's all happening, right? And I get no joy from it. And then, you mentioned spiritually and emotionally. Well, a lot of folks then can tap out, right? You could be like, well, I warned you. I'm going to take care of myself and my wife and my kids, and y'all are on your own. And that's what happens, especially, you and I have traveled around the world in countries where people don't trust each other or their institutions or their governments. Right. What happens? Otherwise, good people say, well, what's the point of me sacrificing? What's the point of me stopping at the red light? What's the point of me following the rules? I'm going to get mine. It kind of brings out the worst. But then I think there's an opportunity here for me to lean in to my spiritual center, my religious beliefs, my values, my ethics, and say, well, I have limited amount of time. I believe one day I will meet my creator. I'm sure you believe that as well. We're all here for a reason. The I haven't seen the end credits yet. The story is still being written, and so I don't know. Look. Let me put it this way. A story that you and I both share with our traditions, right? The story of Moses. People forget. Moses never got to Jerusalem. Moses led his people, right? But then along the way, and Muslims believe this as well, even though he, if you will, helped free the people, lead the people, went against who? The Pharaoh. And yes, I'm using this story very deliberately according to the modern context. He never got to the promised land. And so I sit there at this moment, I say, you know what, Paul? Maybe I won't be the hero of this story. Maybe I won't get to the promised land. Maybe I won't see the fruits of our labor, but maybe our kids will get there, right? And I think that's simultaneously very humbling and inspiring, because the last thing I'll say is everyone assumes they're either the hero or victim of the story. I will be Bruce Willis, John McClane. I will be Ethan Hunt. I will be the Moses. But some of us aren't Moses. We're Aaron. Yeah. And Aaron was Moses' brother, who without Aaron, Moses couldn't do what he did, right? And so there's something there where I'm like, I can't give up. My faith commands hope. And even though I might not get there, and even though this is going to be a long walk, maybe inshallah it's worth it because our kids will get there.
Yeah. I really appreciate all of that. And we had Rabbi Sharon Kleinbaum on a couple weeks ago, and she said, nobody can do everything, but everybody can do something. I think that's like a really important thing to remember. Like, it's not up to Paul, it's not up to Waj, it's up to all of us to figure out something together. So this is actually a really interesting question. I know that you get this, as do I, all the time. People are trying to, what can I do? People ask me as if I'm not asking myself that every day. You have decided various ways to show up. How do you discern this is the way I'm going to spend my time, my valuable time? Because you also have kids, you have a life, and it's actually something that you and your wife built in a beautiful, very moving way. And so in addition to that, how do you decide this is what I think will matter right now? What are the ways you gauge that?
It's a very good question, and it's so funny because last night my daughter Nuseba, she's a cancer survivor, right? So she tried out for some dance classes with her friend, and she got in, and so she got accepted.
Congratulations!
Right? That's big. I don't know anything about dance. I'm a dad of two girls. I'm learning all this stuff. So she gets into this dance troupe with her friend, and so they send over the contract and the fees. And my wife are looking at it. We're like, it's so much. You got kids, So then I look, my daughter. I'm like, listen, Nuseba, this is expensive. Do you really want to do this? She goes, yes, Baba. And you sit there, you're like, yeah, she survived cancer. All right, I'll find a way to do it. Right. So I do it. I tell him, like, listen, Nuseba, you really got to do this because this is expensive. And she goes, Baba, how come you can't be a cardiologist like my
Wow.
My other friends, they seem to have a lot lot I'm like, wow, it's begun.
Yeah. The great disappointment has begun.
She's literally like, can't you just go become a cardiologist? And I'm like, I sat there, I thought about it, I was joking with my wife. I'm like, did I waste my life? Maybe I should have become a cardiologist. My wife is a doctor, but my wife is a family medicine doctor. And she goes, Mama, aren't you a doctor? Can't you be a cardiologist? How come you don't make as much money as the other ones? And my wife's like, I help people. So we were just joking about it, but it made me think about it. Like, what have I done with my life? Is this where I'm supposed to be? Not necessarily in a midlife crisis way, but just thinking about it. And I told my daughter and my kids, jokingly, I said, listen, I think your dad is always going to be poor because your dad chose to be a writer. And then my wife was like, he's also a lawyer. He could be a corporate lawyer. And then Nuseba was like, yeah, how come he should still be a lawyer? And then I'm like, I'd be miserable. So it was us having this conversation literally last night. And I was thinking about it. I'm like, yeah, I'm still a licensed attorney. And there was an opportunity there where I could have pivoted, Paul. I could have pivoted, put all my eggs in the law basket. And I think I would have been, quote unquote, well off. I would be making more money. Sure. I would be more economically stable. Maybe as a lawyer, we all need good lawyers. I could have done my advocacy through there and, use the money to help, nonprofits, as you know how it goes. But for whatever reason, I've always gravitated towards this form of storytelling and advocacy,
Uh-huh.
right? And
Mm.
ideally, speaking through my midlife crisis, not really a crisis, but I'm at that midlife stage. I always wanted to do fiction, novels, and plays. I first came on the scene as a playwright.
Right.
And along the way, because of the chaos that we were dealing with, the post 9/11 chaos that you and I remember, this country lost its mind, which you remember and I remember, right? And so one thing led to another, and I somehow have stumbled into these various roles. I never wanted to be in front of the camera ever.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I'm hosting a TV show, co-hosting a TV show. I'm on CNN. I'm doing commentary. So someone gave me this compliment. Oh, you're really good debating these terrible people. I'm like, I'm not a debater. They're like, what? And they're like, yeah, but you go head to head with them. I have no desire to do that, right? So, in this particular era that for me and I think for you and me has lasted for gosh, now 3 decades because we've been dealing with
Yeah.
crisis after crisis, right?
Right.
9/11, war and terror. This all began even before that, but it was Bush. Without Bush and the war on terror, there was no Trump. We've seen the escalation of extremism and right wing authoritarianism, and so I think it's with me. What I tell people is everyone has a superpower, and I say the same thing that you started off with what the rabbi said. And last week when I was in Philadelphia, I hosted this event and the 700 people showed up. It was an event with Visit Philly and TED partnerships about democracy. And every question, Paul, from the audience the framing was something like this. I'm nobody, but I want to do something.
Yeah.
I'm an average American. What can I do?
100%.
Literally every question. And so what I told everyone at the end was, listen, I hear you all saying I'm a nobody. Guess what? I'm also a nobody. You know, we're all nobodies and we're all somebodies. And speaking
Yeah.
about average Americans, I'm also an average American. Congratulations. I'm right there with you. But everybody can do something and everybody has a superpower. And I really mean this. If someone says, no, bro, you're a writer, you're being self deprecating. I've seen you on CNN, New York Times. Who am I? And I said, listen, kindness is a superpower. Empathy is a superpower. Being a good parent is a superpower. Modeling good behavior is a superpower. Being a
Yeah.
good teacher is a superpower, right? Being a good neighbor is a superpower, right? Running for office. If the world's worst DUI hires are running for office right now, why can't you run for school board? People are like, oh, yeah. Why can't you run for city council? Oh, yeah. Being a doctor who's not only a great doctor, but then informs citizens about their healthcare rights. There's a reason why I always tell people, I tell my wife this, run for office. People still respect doctors, right? They're literally going after the public healthcare infrastructure. The Republicans
Totally.
right now are trying to gut the public healthcare infrastructure. If you have money, you have some leftover money, guess what? Fund racists,
Yes.
right? Fund
Philanthropy.
NGOs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
If you're a parent, go to your schools and make sure they're teaching the right books,
Right.
go and give speeches, right? So everyone can do something. And at the very least, these 50-51 protests all around America, they're
Yeah.
growing, Paul, right?
Yeah.
We have the numbers. That's what people don't realize. I remember the 5-year anniversary of George Floyd. I remember I was having a conversation with a few of my friends, and George Floyd was killed, murdered, and the video came out. And some of my friends were cynical. We're like, will this bring people out on the streets? And one of my friends, he said, man, Americans are too apathetic. I remember I told him, sometimes all it takes is one spark. Just watch. And then what we saw was the largest protest in U.S. history for George Floyd, right?
Yeah.
And what was that? Millions of Americans came out, and temporarily it brought about some change. And then we saw the white lash, anti-DI nonsense that always happens in America. But never underestimate the power of people coming together and mobilizing. And this is where we have the strength, Paul, because even as we're dealing with right wing fascism and just horror story after horror story, they don't have the numbers, Paul.
No,
We have the
completely.
numbers.
I think, it's so important to remember. And it reminds me, as someone who studied law, the name Louis Brandeis, is my great
Of
grandfather.
course.
And my favorite phrase from him is the most important political office is that of the private citizen. Every individual is where the power lies. And I think that there's lots of ways people can come together. And I think storytelling for you is a way of framing the way people are understanding what is happening. And I think that is a really important thing for you to do, because a lot of people think that there are narratives that are set. One thing that Interfaith Alliance is always working against is this idea, okay, religion is de facto against LGBT rights. Religion is de facto against abortion rights. Religion is automatically going to be, regressive, when actually it's much more complicated than that. And there's many people, in fact, the majority of people who want equal dignity for LGBTQ people. And I know that you've been one of those people who's really, on that issue and many others, has just tried really to complicate the narrative, especially when it comes to Islam. And people saying, well, we know Muslims, blah, 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 blah. I hate to put you in the, well, you're the Muslim, talk about that. I think that the most important thing that you have offered, and so many of this huge community of people I've been fortunate to work with, are offering another way of understanding how each of the religious communities participate, even as there is a vested interest that people are trying to paint something and say, this is what they're doing. Look at them over there and what they're doing, and defining for a whole group who they are. That's been something that you have really spoken out about, and it's just been very much appreciated from all of us who are from other faith traditions as well as those within Islam.
Well, I appreciate that my masochism and the fatwas and boycotts against me have been appreciated, but it all does go back to story, right? And once you threaten a set story, it infuriates some people, and we are storytelling animals. And speaking about story and messaging, you keep hearing now in the news that Democrats are spending millions of dollars. What's the story that we can tell men to get them back? What's the story we can tell voters, right? It all goes back to story. Barack Obama was masterful at the storytelling. Hope, change, and here's my story of the multiracial American. If I can and you can, and voila, he sold that story. You know what also sold the story? Donald Trump. It's BS, but nonetheless, he sold that story. Art of the deal, folks. It's complete nonsense. Doesn't matter. I give credit where credit's due. He is a master BSer. He knows how to capture eyeballs through media. It's storytelling, right? And so the story of America, right, being besieged by quote unquote invaders, and they're taking away your money and they're taking away your power. And remember back in the 50s when everything was great and men were men and women were women? Oh, that's a compelling story to some people. And listen to Republicans. They spent $215 million selling a BS story, creating transgender people as a boogie person. Right. And and I know that so many of our friends who know better got lulled into this fear. They're coming after your kids. Your son's going to become a girl, right? Let's be honest, Paul. It worked. It was, they're doing the audit of the 2024 election. They're like, that $215 million helped Republicans in part win over some disaffected voters, right? Even though complete BS. And in the past, it was Willie Horton, the blacks, the Mexicans, the Muslims, the undocumented. And now it's transgender folks. And what I try to do is, like you said, throw some wrenches in the story. And I saw Muslim American communities right here in the DMV get lulled by this in the past 4 years. And Paul, I've been warning people. I said, listen, I've been following the right wing. I've been studying them. I've written a report on them. I know how they operate. What they did with the anti-Muslim scare since 9/11 is what they're doing with transgender folks, specifically LGBTQ. It is literally, Paul, the same story. They've just rebooted the villain. I connected the dots. I said, they're going to prey on us. Don't allow them to do a divide and conquer. It started here in Loudoun County, Paul. Right?
Yeah. No. I mean, we were involved in that, and I 100%. Yeah.
Loudoun County, 2021. It was successful. Then they decided, okay, let's use it for the governorship of Glenn Youngkin. Let's see if it helps him win. He won. It won in Virginia. Let's nationalize it, and voila! Now you have anti-DEI, anti-wokeness, anti-transgender, parents' rights. Liberals are too gay. And I've never tried to compromise my religious views, and I always tried to be honest. I did a piece in the New York Times, I think a year and a half ago, warning about this. And I said, Muslims don't be duped. Muslims don't fall for it, right? And if you notice, Paul, in the piece, I never said, Islamically, this is halal, this is haram. That doesn't matter. I said, what matters is that they're coming after transgenders and they're going to come after you. And our faith commands us to do the least amount of harm and the most amount of good, right? And is it ethical for us as Muslims to sit there and throw these people under the bus, even though members of these communities came out against the Muslim ban? And if you asked, LGBTQ activists who came out during the first Trump administration and said, do you accept Allah as God and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as the final messenger? They'd be like, no, I hate Islam. I hate religion. I think it sucks. But I'm here because I believe my Muslim neighbors have freedoms and rights.
Up next, much more with Wajahat Ali. You can hear full episodes of The State of Belief anytime on our website at stateofbelief.com. You'll also find links to topics we discussed this week, as well as transcripts and more. And make sure you subscribe at stateofbelief.com/subscribe. You're listening to The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet. Welcome back to The State of Belief. I'm Interfaith Alliance President, Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush. My guest is Wajahat Ali, writer, commentator, and self-described recovering attorney. And you've really done deep dives. You've actually been part of producing white papers and documentaries. But here's the thing. We don't have to agree on everything, but we can agree that in a democracy, people can be different.
Absolutely.
And that is, I think, really, really important. And right now, what we're up against is a small group of people. I agree with you. I mean, a lot of it is really about Christian nationalism that is bringing in, we can bring in the Muslims for this piece, and we can bring in the Jews on this piece, and we'll actually pit them against each other when it's convenient for us. But there's this idea among a small group within Christianity. It's not even Christians as a whole. It's really a small group within who want to exercise power over everybody else and dictate what's happening. And that's what we're seeing. It's crazy what's happening right now. I mean, you listed a lot of things at the top of the hour. Just like what's happening in communities around the country with censorship, taking away stories. I mean, you talk about storytelling as being so important, and that's the reason they're targeting stories. I mean, what do you think about all the censorship that's happening right now? And by the way, it's LGBTQ stories, it's Black stories, and it's Muslim stories, and it's Jewish stories. And it's just so crazy that these stories are attempted to be erased. And I think you've spoken so well about how this is a playbook.
Oh, yeah. Let's go back to the word fascism. And if you look at authoritarian, if you don't like the word fascist, let's look at authoritarian regimes. And we don't have to go back to Nazi Germany or Mussolini. Let's just look at Hungary, which is the model for the modern MAGA movement. How do we know? They tell you. Steve Bannon said that Viktor Orban, the president of Hungary, was Trump before Trump. Hungary is no longer a democracy, right? Single party rule. It's a sham democracy and is authoritarian. What did Orban do? Orban did what other authoritarians in the past have done. He went after what? The media. He went after culture. He went after judges. He went after universities, right? He hauled out the institutions, replaced anyone who was critical with yes men. What is Donald Trump doing, right? Threatening media, threatening judges, going after universities, right? Specifically when it comes to his first executive order and one of the first things he did in office, purging DEI. DEI is all the books and narratives and stories about the rest of us, people of color, immigrants, Black people, women. Specifically, he started with LGBTQ. And because Americans are terrified of transgender people, they're ignorant about transgender people, who are only 1%, transgender folks became the Trojan horse. Oh, we're only going to get rid of transgender. A week later, the Navajo code talkers, we're going to scrub that also. Harriet Tubman and Jackie Robinson, we'll scrub that also. Tuskegee Airmen, we'll scrub that also. Women, we'll get rid of you because meritocracy. Qualified Black men, we'll get rid of you. Oh, but you know
Unbelievable.
what?
Remember, you live in D.C. I mean, when that flight went down, terrifically, terribly. The first thing out of their mouths was, "Oh, is this a DEI problem?"
Absolutely. It was Hegseth, and to underscore the point, at that press conference, it was Trump, Hegseth, who was a former Fox host, and the Secretary of Transportation, Duffy, who was a former Real World.
They really like those.
Talk about DEI, DEI. We're going to purge DEI, get rid of DEI. And you literally have the world's worst affirmative action white Christian nationalist hires, because both of those men are committed to a white Christian nationalism. And white Christian nationalism, Paul,
Yeah.
how it's all connected, needs a single story. The need to impose on the rest of us that America was created and founded by white Christian men for white Christian men, and God has ordained these white Christian men to purify this land, right? And to do anything, and what anything and everything to do is necessary for the second coming of Jesus. And as such, they can't be racist, they can't be barbaric, they can't be cruel, because they're on a mission from God. And as such, this mission can be a bit messy, but sometimes, you need a bit of messiness for the good to win out in the long run. And what's the good? A white Christian nation, by white Christians, for white Christians, and the rest of us, if we play along and follow the same script, we can, live. But as long as we yield to the white Christians.
Yeah, it is white, 100% white Christians, and a certain kind of white Christian. And the moment you try to work with immigrants, you're thrown off the bus. The moment you try to do work with the poor, you're thrown off the bus. The moment you try, you know what I mean? So we saw, like, in the first month of this administration, you remember, like, attacking the Catholic bishops because of their work, attacking the Lutherans because of their work, attacking Bishop Buddy because she had the gall to ask for mercy for the most vulnerable.
Yep.
I mean, so, it's a vision, lest anybody be lulled into the, well, I'm a white Christian. Nah, you have to be a very particular, like, I'm definitely not the white Christian they're looking for.
Not you, but you're like a hardcore lefty. I'm glad you mentioned this, because I always tell people, if you think fascists won't come after you, they tried to kill Mike Pence. And Mike Pence
that's a good point.
White, male, conservative, straight, Christian man. He prostrated himself before Trump. He gave up everything, but at the last second, listening to Dan Quayle and Justice Ludwig, he said, "Okay, I'll do my job and certify the election." And what happened? What happened to Mike Pence, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, thrown off the bus. Hang Mike Pence was a thing. So, one of the things that is, I think, really important right now is the puncturing of inevitability, because I don't think this is inevitable at all. I think that what you were talking about, we have the people, and as long as the people don't stay home, as long as the people don't stay silent, as long as the people show up when invited and when not invited to show up, I think that we can push this back. I do want to talk a little bit. I want to, first of all, the left hook. Just say where people can find, because I think what you are offering, it's so helpful for people who are looking for sustenance. So the left hook is Substack. People can go to Left Hook Substack and find it and sign up and hopefully pay something and help support the dance classes for your daughter. Come on, people.
It's the lefthook.substack.com, the lefthook.substack.com. And what I've done, and this is much of the pain of my immigrant parents, I have kept everything free. There's no paywall. You pay what you can. I'm like Blanche Dubois. I depend on the kindness of strangers. And the reason, and my dad and my mom independently and then together they team up. They're like, but beta, son, why? Everyone else does paywalls. Why can't you? And each time I'm tempted to do a paywall, Paul, I sit there and I always get a message from someone, usually not always a senior, who says, I really appreciate the interviews that you do, the experts that you bring on, the pieces that you write, because they help keep me informed. And, right now times are tough. And, you keeping it free really helps me. But I promise you, if I get some money, I'll do it. So I'm like, all right, because I feel like when it comes to mobilizing the masses, and again, folks, we have the numbers, you need an informed citizenry.
Yeah.
And you notice experts on authoritarianism and fascism, they say, what's the first thing to die in a fascist regime? The truth, right?
Yeah.
You don't know who to believe. You don't know what to believe. And in the chaos and confusion, an authoritarian rises and says, trust me. Trust me, I'm your savior. I'm your protector. People
Which is actually quotes from Trump. I mean,
yeah.
100%. Like, I'm the only one who can save you. I'm the only one. You know what I
Don't
mean?
believe your
So,
ears. Don't
yeah.
believe your eyes. You can't trust the enemy of the people. You can't trust the deep state, right? And then we have a record. Right now, there's a record low in trust in media. There's a record low in trust in our institutions. And I was reading, I think it was Pew. Yes, it was Pew. A third of Americans don't trust fellow Americans. So
Right.
how do you have a citizenry that can function? How do you have a society that can function if there's no trust? Like, think about the basic transactions that we engage in, Paul, where it's purely based on trust. I'll go to a restaurant. I trust that
Yeah.
the barista is not going to put cyanide in my latte, right? She
Right.
could spit in it. I have no idea, but there's just a trust, like common
Yeah. Yeah.
decency, right? The golden rule: do unto others like you that you want done to you. So when a society breaks down on trust and people can't trust each other, they can't trust the experts, they can't trust doctors. We'll
Right.
have something where, oh, I don't know, maybe Paul, there's a once in a lifetime pandemic in which the
Yeah.
breakdown in trust results in the death of over 1 million people, more so than any country on earth. And that's what happened in the United States of America during COVID. Over 1 million of our fellow Americans died, more so than in China, in India, anywhere else, because of disinformation, conspiracies,
Right.
mistrust, lack of faith, lack of trust.
And by the way, that lack of trust and that misinformation is not accidental. A lot of it is out there on purpose, and it's meant to. So, but one of the things that I you are I hesitate to mention it, but it is kind of really entertaining when you're on Fox News or one of these programs. And honestly, I'm too chicken when I'm offered the opportunity to go in there and debate someone. I'm like, I don't want to, I'm not getting on their turf. You just go into the fire. Like, so you must go in there there's something inside you that's just like, boom, boom, boom. I'm going to say what I need to say. How do you go into those situations? And what can you pull back the curtain a little bit? Like, what are the
Absolutely.
people like actually when they're not on camera? Is there any like other side to any of this?
Yeah, so I'll give you two examples. I used to be on CNN. They had me on for a year. I was a contributor. And so there's a green room. And in the green room, you all hang out, right? There's a screen, there's some Cokes and waters you drink. And they had me on and they found out that I was actually really good. And again, going back to full circle, they had me on. I don't know why they had me on. They hired me because I understood, I connected the dots for the shooter in New Zealand, the Christchurch shooter. And for whatever reason, Zucker at that time said, oh man, this guy broke it down really well. So they hired me. But then they didn't use me, Paul, for like a month. And it was the only time in my life. And being a child of immigrants, I got paid for doing nothing and I felt super guilty. So I said, you
Wow.
guys have me, just use me. And so they had me on and they kind of just threw me on a panel and they realized, oh, this guy can also talk about current affairs. And I remember one time they had me on and I went up against one of these right-wing guys, right? These Trumpers. This is the first Trump administration. And they're like, oh, this guy didn't back down. He had his facts. And so that's how they got me on all the time. Morning shows, evening shows. And they're like, oh, we could put a Waj against a Scott Jennings, or we could put a Waj against a Rick Santorum. We could put a Waj on a panel, right? And so I never wanted to debate. I just happened to know the facts and I was blunt, right? And I didn't lose my cool. And apparently it said I was pretty good TV. So when you're in the green room, I'll tell you this, and this will be very disconcerting for most people. I can tell you without any shred of a doubt that the overwhelming majority of Republicans that I used to quote unquote debate hated Donald Trump. They hated Donald Trump. They mocked him. They mocked him behind his back, and they mocked his followers. Nearly every single one, except there were two who were true believers at that time. This guy called Perez Denard, who later then got allegations of sexual abuse. Notice there's a common thread. And then there was this other guy before Scott Jennings. There was Rick Santorum, and before Rick Santorum, there was Jeffrey Lord. Jeffrey Lord was the guy in the first Trump administration who got fired because he did a fake Zig Heil. Zig Heils, notice how they've become very mainstream.
That's no problem now. No problem.
Yeah, no problem now. So back then he was jokingly doing Zig Heil, he got fired, right? So I think those were the only two true believers. Nearly every other person in the green room, you meet them, you talk to them, you do some BS conversations about, families and kids. And they were just like, yeah, I can't stand this guy. Oh, he sucks. And I'm like, you don't have to go out and defend him. But to quote the Born Identity, look at what they make you give. They realize that's how their bread was buttered.
Yeah.
Increasingly, 2017, 2018, 2019, when it became clear to all of us and to them that Trump is not an anomaly and Trump cannot be controlled. Remember that? Oh, we'll control him. We'll
Yeah.
contain him. I give you Lindsey Graham. I give you
Ugh.
Marco Rubio. Go back and look at their own quotes from 2016 and look at them now, Paul, right? So behind the scenes, it's so sickening and hypocritical for people listening. I will tell you with hand on my heart, most of these people in DC think he's a clown, dislike him, are disgusted by him, but they realize that MAGA and Donald Trump now represent the base. And now you fast forward 10 years, those people who don't bend the knee, who haven't prostrated themselves, who haven't sold their soul, like you said, like Mike Pence, they're seen as rhinos and they are excised from the party, right? Now, fast forward 2025, I'm on Piers Morgan. I just went on last week. I have Michael Knowles, Dave Rubin, and Piers Morgan. And these people, look at what they make you give. They're not stupid men. They're highly educated. And I have Dave Rubin now openly saying, who was once a liberal but found out that he had money in the right wing, I trust Grok for medical advice. Imagine being a grown man, an intelligent man, telling the world, I trust Grok, the Twitter AI bot that was like programmed to talk about white genocide for medical advice instead of doctors.
So freaky.
So this is where they are now. They have become willing Ottomans for a fascist regime. Piers Morgan, an intelligent man. You know, we were talking about Joe Biden because they're all distracting right now. They can't talk about Trump because it's a disaster. So they're talking about Joe Biden's health. So I was brought on to talk about 35 minutes about Joe Biden's health. And I said, okay, if you want to talk about Joe Biden's health, let's also talk about Trump's health. I want Biden's public records. I want Trump's public records. And then Piers Morgan said with a straight face in front of an international audience, Donald Trump has the strength of a 30-year-old man.
Oh, good Lord.
So
that is crazy.
That is where we are right now in 2025. The emperor has no clothes, but because they're in a part of a fascist regime and they realize that Donald Trump is the king and daddy, they have to say, grown-ass men, you have to forfeit your dignity, your ethics, your values, your intelligence, and say with a straight face, Donald Trump has the strength of a 30-year-old man.
Oh my God! I mean, I'm going to go back to that tape because I want to see your face when he says that, because that is that is sycophantic. I think one of the things that you have been dealing with your entire career has been this. Another tension has been the idea that the Jewish and Muslim communities, there's no way they can talk to each other. And that has only been exacerbated since October 7th, but it certainly didn't start there, that there was like that they were always going to be at odds, that it was a zero-sum game. And yet, you know, because of my work at Interfaith Alliance, like, you know, trying to imagine a center imperfectly, but not a center politically, but a center where we can hold together and talk to one another and be with one another and imagine a future with one another. You even more so, I think, put yourself in situations that wins you no friends in your own community or in any other community, except for people like me who really appreciate it. But I wonder if you can talk a little bit about maybe inject some sense of possibility amidst a narrative where there is no possibility.
So this deserves its own podcast because there's so much to unpack, especially with what's happened over the past year and a half and what's happening right now in Gaza. And we're seeing how that's being weaponized by the worst people on earth. Increase in both anti-Arab violence, anti-Semitic violence, Islamophobia, and the weaponization of anti-Semitism by actual anti-Semites in the Republican Party to go after free speech, go after students, go after universities, right? And most Jews, according to the polls, they know what's up. And they know this is terrible for Jews. If you go after freedom and liberties, who is it bad for? All the minorities. And they literally are out there saying, not in our name, right? So the world's worst, I told you so, Brown Cassandra, researching the right wing and researching Islamophobia, specifically during the second Obama term. I know I wrote this report, Fear Incorporated, the Roots of the Islamophobia Network in America. And folks, to terrify you, all those freaks and extremists that I mentioned are now either in the White House or one step removed from the Trump White House. All the people who are on the fringe are now in the center of the Republican Party. What I told folks at that time, and people didn't take me seriously, is there's a transnational alliance between Islamophobes. And I said, you should spend money doing a Fear Inc. 2, talking about the European and American alliance between Islamophobes. And furthermore, it's not just Muslims. Today it's the Muslims, but these people also hate, Paul, gays, women, Mexicans, black folks, and wait for it, Jews. And so I tried to tell, and this might not be the most elegant framing, but just to identify, a lot of pro-Israel, I would say very Zionist, either left or right-wing pro-Israel Zionist Jewish Americans, that the marriage that some of your leaders and organizations, I'm being very clear here, because leaders and organizations are not representative, as you know, of the actual people. Same thing within my communities, right? Like maybe they'll represent 30, 40%, but they don't represent like 60 to 70%, right? I said the marriage of convenience that you have made with Christian Zionists, Christian nationalists, white Christian nationalists, Republicans, for the sake of Israel, this is a Faustian bargain. And I remember I said this in Jerusalem, because I went and I tried to make inroads with Jewish communities based upon what I saw was coming down the line. And what I saw was coming down the line, Paul, was the mainstreaming of white Christian nationalism and white supremacy. And knowing full well that they don't care about Jews, Paul, right? They'll go after black people, Muslims, transgender people, but guess who they'll go after right after? Jews. That train's never late. And what folks told me in Jerusalem were like, these people are silly. We don't believe in their narrative. Yeah, we know they're using us because they believe that Jews need to control, Al-Aqsa, or the Temple Mount, as Jews say. That's the story, right? That Jews need to be in control of Haram al-Sharif, the Temple Mount, in order for Jesus to come back. And who is the first person that Jesus kills? Jews, and then Muslims. But they're like, this is BS. We don't care. So tit for tat, quid pro quo, it'll be fine. And I said, you're in bed with some interesting people like Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens. I follow these people. Trust me, this won't go well, right? So I tried to create those inroads because a majority of Jewish Americans, as you know, in some way, shape, or form, Paul, identify as Zionists. That means different things to different people. At the very least, it means they believe in the right of Israel to exist, even though they might be against Netanyahu, the occupation. They might want to go back to 67 borders, yada, 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 yada. Okay. So I said, you cannot ignore all Zionist Jews, because I knew it was a big term. Just like Jews cannot ignore people who are pro-Palestinian and throw us under the bus and call us anti-Semites. And I also told Jews, if you look at progressive part, it ain't just the Arabs and Muslims. It just ain't Arabs and Muslims. I said, listen, you're not paying attention to people of color who are saying, I cannot be a progressive and now throw Palestine under the bus. I can't, right? Voila, what happened in the past year and a half, Paul? What's happening right now? Look at where Israel's going. Look at the popularity rating of Israel. It's completely underwater, especially with young people. Look at progressives. I can't support Israel. Apartheid, occupation, a genocide in real time, right? That's Amnesty International. I mean, you've seen it. And so many Jews now are like, I can't support this. Like, I have to re-question my Zionism, right? And many of the students who led the ceasefire protest and the anti-occupation protest, Jewish students saying not in our names, right? And now you're seeing this Trump administration got in power, and people always told me, well, Kamala and Biden and Democrats, they're also responsible. Yes. And they also failed. Yes. But so there's no difference. I'm like, there is a difference. Well, what's worse than genocide, Waj? And I said, genocide plus what's happening now. And now you're seeing them go after Muslims and Jews and Palestinians and students. So here we are. We ain't going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. Jews ain't going anywhere. We have to find a space where like I tell Jews, you have to give some space for people to criticize Israel. You have to. If you just harp on them and say they're anti-Semitic, which I don't think is the right definition, simply being critical of Zionism in Israel, you're going to lose allies. And also I tell everyone else, you have to find some space. And this is what progressives get really pissed off at me. To include Jews or welcome Jews, or at least talk to Jews who might be Zionist, right? Because without that, we're going to be at loggerheads. I'm not saying you agree with it, but you have to be like, okay, what do you mean by that? Like, are you supporting Israel right now? Or do you say, okay, I believe Israel has a right to exist. I condemn Hamas. I condemn Hezbollah. I condemn, Ben Gvir. I commend Netanyahu. I'm against occupation. I'm against apartheid, but I'm still a Zionist. Okay, you're pro-Palestinian. That doesn't mean you want the erasure of Israel. You want a free Palestine, either as one state, two states. You want equality for Palestinians. Okay, do you see what I'm saying? But if you're unwilling to even talk, and this is where we're at right now, Paul. Oh, you're pro-Palestinian. I'm going to destroy you. Oh, you're a Zionist. I'm going to destroy you. Who at the end of the day gets screwed, Paul?
Right.
And if you think I'm wrong, tell me I'm wrong.
No. I 100% agree with you. I think that sitting at the table and making, and these definitions, we use definitions, we throw them around, and then everybody ascribes their own understanding of what that definition is. And if you're not at the table, and if you're not imagining, okay, I understand you, and I'm going to disagree with you on that, and we are going to find a way because it's not going to work for anybody. And I do know that you have, just the fact that you've engaged in this kind of work have been criticized within your own community for engaging in conversation with Jews. I know that you've come under attack like that.
Oh yeah.
And so it's very, I just think it's really important for those of us, who can to try to find tables, and if we can't find the table, create the table where people can find a way to come together in this moment. Because if we can't talk to one another, there is a group that is very happy with that and is exacerbating fault lines.
Oh, absolutely. I still am boycotted. This is the irony. Maybe a little bit less, but I was boycotted allegedly for being a Zionist collaborator, even though no Zionist on earth calls me a Zionist because I'm not Zionist. You'll never find me ever. I've been writing about this for 20 years, ever justifying or rationalizing the occupation. I've always been against it. The settlements, right? Apartheid conditions. And then in the past year and a half, because I've been very critical of Israel, and I joined the family members of the hostages who've been critical of Israel, and I'm saying, and I've also condemned Hamas, and I said this will be terrible for the region, for Palestinians, for Israeli security, and all the world's worst Cassandra. Everything that's happened a year and a half ago, me and a few others called out. I've been boycotted by mainstream. I have. You've seen the crackdown on anyone who speaks out for Palestinians, not just Arabs and Muslims, but we've seen it, right? And so I have I live a very interesting life, Paul, where I'm one of the very few people who is boycotted by all sides. Now that either means I'm doing something right, or that means I'm a giant asshole who everyone dislikes.
I think you can do both things. Listen, I just want to end on a note that one of the things that's important is to recognize humanity. And I know this is now feels like in the past, but it's still something when I see you, and especially with the way you started talking about the dance lessons, like your TED Talk about having children and sharing with the audience about your daughter's struggle with cancer, and I just think it's really important. Like even listener, even if you're like all of a sudden like, well, what do I think about Wajahat Ali? I have conflicting emotions. Like recognize that he has a beautiful family, and he has he's gone through all sorts of things, and we're. And if you scratch the surface, we have to figure out a way to recognize our humanity with one another and not like just harden our hearts. And so I just want to, give some final words from you about like, family and kind of roundabout, like where we started.
That was a TED Talk called The Case for Children. And it's not the Elon Musk eugenics pronatalism. It is actually a Trojan horse speech for progressive natal policies. To actually give people health care, to give people a living wage, to help women, right, have economic freedom, right? That was the Trojan horse of that speech. And furthermore, when I was giving that speech at TED, I found out that week that my then 2-year-old daughter, Nuseba, who's now the hip-hop dancer, 9-year-old, about to turn 9, got diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. And so the irony of me making the case for children while, having a kid who had stage 4 cancer, and I'm sitting there, had to compartmentalize everything. And now we find out that Joe Biden, despite my critiques of him, is an 82-year-old man with stage 4 cancer that has metastasized to the bone. And as this is happening, the Trump administration in the first 100 days has cut cancer research by 31% and has cut billions of dollars from the National Institute of Health and is planning to cut $880 billion from Medicaid. and 20% of Americans depend upon Medicaid for survival. That's how children are born. Many children are born. And so you can disagree with me, but at the end of the day, going back full circle, maybe we can find some common agreement that all of us and all of our families, no matter what our families look like and what skin color they are and where they come from and who is their mom and their dad and what they believe and don't believe, everyone has a right to live a life of dignity. And everyone has a right to live a life of security. And everyone has a right to live a life where their government, the most powerful, wealthy government on earth, maybe gives them, basic health care, maybe gives them an education, maybe gives them a realistic shot of a person, having the right to dream of being the hero of their own story. Is that too much to ask, Paul, from the world's wealthiest, most powerful country? I don't think so. So that's what I'm fighting for. And what I'll end on this is, I don't need people to suffer in order to feel great again. Let me repeat this. I don't need people nor want people to suffer in order to feel great again. Even the people who disagree with me, even the people who love Trump, what I want for them and their family? I want them to have health care. I want them to have education. I want them to have high-paying jobs. I want them to live with security and peace. That's what I want for you. And so at the end of the day, that's the story and the ending that I'm fighting for, knowing full well, realistically, I probably won't be alive to see it, but don't our kids deserve better than this? I say yes.
Wajahat Ali is the author of Go Back to Where You Came From and other helpful recommendations on how to become an American. He has a very popular Substack, The Left Hook with Wajahat Ali, and co-hosts the Democracy-ish podcast. Waj, thank you so much for being with us on The State of Belief.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Who do you know who would get a lot out of this discussion with Wajahat Ali? Please share The State of Belief with them and be sure to subscribe to The State of Belief at Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast platform. We need your help to keep making The State of Belief. Please make a financial contribution today at interfaithalliance.org. The views and opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily reflect those of Religion News Service or Religion News Foundation. The State of Belief is produced by Ray Kirstein and is a production of Interfaith Alliance. Become a member today at interfaithalliance.org. And be sure to join us next week. I can't wait. Until then, I'm Paul Brandeis Raushenbush on The State of Belief, where religion and democracy meet.